Mr. President. Please, sir, wake up.
Okay, Woodley. I'm awake.
Sir, it's an emergency.
Well, come on, man. Is it war?
No, sir.
The bomb?
No, Mr. President.
Well, what is it?
The Council of Economic Advisors and its entire staff have unanimously agreed on something.
Spell it out, Woodley.
Mr. President, the Council has concluded the country is headed for economic collapse, and there is no way of stopping it.
So here it is. Finally. Judgment Day. No hope at all.
No, sir.
I can't accept that, Woodley. There has to be something we can do.
They say it's too late, sir. Unanimously.
We all knew it was bad, Woodley. But we were hoping it wouldn't come to this. Why weren't we warned? Why weren't we advised?
Sir, I guess no one wanted to believe it could happen. Not to us.
But wasn't there anybody who could see this thing coming? Certainly with all these experts out there?
Well, sir, there was one. As a matter of fact, everything he predicted did come true.
Well, why wasn't I told about it?
You were, sir. The whole nation was, but nobody would believe him. They called him a merchant of gloom and doom.
Who is he? Is he still around?
Professor Benjamin Franklin, sir. Professor of economics at the university. He's retired now, living down near the border.
Woodley, find that man and have him here by lunch. Professor Franklin? Benjamin Franklin?
Yes, Mr. President. How may I help you?
Professor, I'm told you're the one who forecast everything that has happened with our economy over the years. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you speak up?
I did, sir.
Why didn't the people listen?
People listen to a lot of things, sir. They believe what they want to.
Have you been briefed?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with the council?
Yes, sir, I do.
You mean to say there is nothing we can do about our economy? It is absolutely too late? The country is ruined?
Yes, sir, I certainly do. Unless, of course...
What, man, what?
Unless, sir, economics could be debunked on a mass scale in a very short time.
Explain that, sir.
Mr. President, the basics of economics are so simple. It's just that the other forces infiltrate economics and make it a puzzle rather than the science it is. If these forces can be prevented from clouding the science, then, sir, anybody, you, me, anybody, could have predicted what I did and with the accuracy that had to be.
Professor Franklin, I still don't understand.
Well, Mr. President, let me put it this way. If the people of the United States, or any place in the world for that matter, could be taught the fundamentals of economics in such a manner as to bypass their biases and prejudices, then the people could turn ruin into prosperity.
You believe that?
I know it, sir.
Is it possible?
Mr. President, I don't know. For years, I've been living a very simple life. No newspapers, no radio, no television. I tried to leave my despair behind me, sir. I didn't want to watch what I knew would happen.
Well, what's that got to do with our crisis?
Mr. President, I don't know how ingrained with myths people are these days.
Can you find out?
Yes, sir, I can.
How?
With an experiment, sir.
What do you need?
Sir, I am a teacher. Give me one day with 3 people of differing views. The more extreme the views, the better the experiment.
Precisely what do you want, Mr. Franklin?
Sir, a staunch Republican conservative, an extreme Democrat liberal, and a strict independent.
Woodley, get these computers cranking. You have these people in the White House tonight. Appeal to their patriotism. Tell them they'll be back in their home tomorrow night.
Good morning to you all. I'm your teacher, Dr. Benjamin Franklin. You are here to learn economics. At the end of the day, I must report to the President that you have either learned economics or you have not. The fate of the country may well be influenced by what happens here today. Don't be nervous. You are not chosen because of who you are, but rather what you represent. Let's begin by going around the table. Identify yourself. Tell us a little about yourself and how you feel about our government and our economy. You, sir.
Well, all I know is the phone rang, someone asked me a few questions, asked me if I love my country, and 45 minutes later there was a man in uniform at my door. In no time, we were in a military jet on our way here to Washington. I've never been so amazed. Me, right here in the White House. Well, my name is Tom. I'm 47 years old, single, a history teacher at a high school just outside Boston. I've been a teacher all my life, and I love it. I think I'm good at it, and it's rewarding to mold young minds. I've also been a Democrat all my life. I feel there are so many people in this country that need help, and I think it's the government's job to give them that help. Through the years, it seems like the government just never does enough for people. There are so many people so rich and so many so poor, and I just think it's unfair. This is why I'm a Democrat.
And you, young lady?
My name is Carol. I live in San Diego. I'm a certified public accountant, and I've been in business for myself for several years. I'll confess to be crowding my mid-30s, and I have a feeling the reason I'm here, or that I've been selected, is I'm just about the political opposite of Tom. I'm as Republican and as conservative as they come, I guess. The reason for my conservatism is I'm an accountant and I understand fiscal responsibility. Ever since I first voted, it seems to be the Republicans who care the most about the country's finances. My husband and I have no children. We work hard, and we wish there was a lot less government interfering with our lives.
And you, sir?
My name is Jeff. I was born and raised in St. Joseph, Missouri. That's a small city on the Missouri River, about halfway between where Tom and Carol live. I just turned 30. I'm married, and my wife stays home with our 2 children. I've been working at the same plant in St. Joe since I got out of the Army. As far as politics are concerned, I vote for the man and I vote on the issues. I don't consider myself any particular type of voter. I make a decent wage, but frankly, it seems we just get by. With all the payments we've got and all the things the kids need, we just don't seem to be making any headway. So I usually vote for the person who is going to work for the things that might improve our situation.
All right. Now a little exercise to help you learn. Carol, pretend you are inside Tom's brain. Look at yourself through his eyes. What do you think he sees?
Gosh, Professor, now that I think of it, he probably sees me as hard, unyielding, and cruel to people just because I feel as strongly as I do about fiscal responsibility. Tom, I'm not. I'm really not. I really care for people, and I consider myself a loving person. I just wish everybody in the world was well and happy.
Now, Tom, get inside Carol's brain and look at yourself through her attitudes. How do you think she perceives you?
Well, I guess she'd think there isn't any way in the world that she and I could agree on anything. She probably thinks I'm one of those do-gooders with my head in the clouds, that I'm just an idealist and haven't the faintest idea about the realities of life. Honestly, Carol, I work hard. I do the grocery shopping. I see prices going up. I just feel better about this world if things were more fair. I think I've got just as good a handle on reality as anyone else.
And Jeff, how would you think either Tom or Carol would perceive you, your thinking and feelings?
You know, I've never really thought about anything like that. But now that you mention it, I suppose it's possible either one of them might think I'm a little wishy-washy for not supporting a certain cause or party. And maybe they do. But honestly, I don't feel it's wrong not to pledge allegiance to any one of our political parties. Sometimes I think the country would be better off if there weren't any political parties. Just the issues and just the caliber of the person running for an office. Seems like when the Democrats get in, the country is full of problems. Then the Republicans get in. It's still full of problems. I'm not sure what difference it does make, but I think I get your point. I think other people who feel strongly one way or another might look at somebody like me as either not caring enough or maybe not smart enough to call himself one or the other.
Now, students, you have already grasped one of the essentials to becoming good learners. Our views can be very different and yet very sincere. If there is a difference, it doesn't necessarily mean somebody is right and somebody is wrong. What we learn today is your views don't make any difference in economics. Economics is independent of your education, of your political belief, of your religious beliefs, of your color, your gender, your age. We will see that the basic principles in the science of economics, which is the science of the material welfare of mankind, apply to any economic entity.
What do you mean by economic entity, sir?
Well, Tom, all by yourself, you are an economic entity. You are a wage earner. You could be considered a family of one. Jeff, your family of 4 is an economic entity. Carol, your business could be considered an economic entity. An oil company or steel manufacturer could be called an economic entity. In other words, a corporation, a company, a town, a county, or a state is an economic entity. A country certainly is an economic entity. A region or a continent could be called an economic entity. The whole world could be called an economic entity. A tribe of headhunters in New Guinea could be called an economic entity.
Okay, Professor, we get it.
Fine. Let's see how the basic principles of economics apply to each and every one of these entities. One of the best ways to understand something is to create a model of it. Physicists make models of the universe and the solar system. They make models of the tiniest particles, atoms, molecules, and such. Architects make models of buildings before they are built. Biologists make models of the most complicated cells in order to understand them. Sociologists make models of societies and groups they are striving to understand. In medicine, there are models of body organs. The jumbo jet, before it became a reality, was a model in a wind tunnel. Let's create a model of an economic entity, say, for instance, a country. We will call our country the land of Nas.
Why Nas, Professor?
Why not? Now, let's say the land of Nas is composed of 10 people, and these 10 people produce various goods and services. We have in Nas a carpenter who makes things, a doctor who tends to people, an automaker who produces cars, a janitor who cleans up places, a farmer who grows crops, an artist who paints pictures, a tailor who makes clothes, a movie producer who produces movies, a repairman who fixes things, and a baker who bakes bread, rolls, and cakes. Okay, students, can you visualize Nas? The farmer takes off in the morning and plows the field. The doctor treats a broken leg. The repairman fixes a clock. And later, several of them gather around while the artist paints a picture. Everybody is happy in Nas. Now, the total of all things that are made and all the services rendered by these different people who are producing their own things for the benefit of themselves and the other people in Nas, the total of what they do throughout the course of a given year is what economists call the gross national product. These are fancy words that simply mean the sum of all the goods and services produced in a given year. In other words, the movie producer is going to make so many movies, the carpenter is going to build so many tables and chairs, the farmer is going to bring in so many bushels of wheat, the janitor is going to be able to clean up so many places, and so on. You get the concept? All these things that are made and all the services rendered in 1 year, put them all together, and that's what's called the gross national product. Now, we must understand the movies that are produced. The people go to see, the tables that are built, people buy, and the shirts the tailor made are bought. In other words, all the goods made and all the services rendered are consumed. Now we come to a very important concept. You've heard people talk about the standard of living for any economic unit, whether it be a country, a person, a family, a continent, a company, what have you. The standard of all living in Nas is equal to what is consumed. How well off people are is measured by what they buy, what they use, or what they consume. The standard of living for Nas is equal to the sum of all things the carpenter builds, all the treatments or services the doctor gives, all the cars the automaker makes, all the cleaning the janitor does, all the crops the farmer grows, all the paintings the artist paints, all the clothes the tailor makes, all the movies the producer makes, all the things the repairman fixes, and all of the things the banker bakes. Add them all together, and that is the gross national product of Nas. All these things are then consumed by the 10 people. The consuming of these goods and services is what is called standard of living for the country of Nas. Add up all the results of everyone's labor, and that is the gross national product. Then the consuming of that gross national product is the measure of the standard of living of Nas.
Professor, are you saying the standard of living for the repairman would be the same as what it is for the doctor, as an example?
Not at all, Jeff. We are only talking about the country as a whole. Now, in your family, is your standard of living any different than, say, one of your children?
Absolutely. I work, my children don't. I eat more than they do.
Right. There are differences within the individual unit, But for now, we are viewing the country as a whole.
I see.
And now we are on the verge of the first and the most basic of all economic principles, that of production. Let's say, as an example, in a particular year, the carpenter decides to work 12 hours a day instead of the 8 hours he has worked in the past. And then instead of just building tables and chairs, he now also builds some bookcases and cabinets. And let's say the farmer, instead of plowing by mule, buys himself a tractor and working no longer hours than he did in the previous year. Turns out many more bushels of wheat and corn, and also produces some other crops with the spare time the tractor has given him. And let's suppose the tailor goes to tailor school and learns how to make all the things he made before, dresses, shirts, and pants, much better and faster. And with these newly acquired skills, produces all he did in any other year, plus some, suits, skirts, and blouses, things he never did before. In this year, because some people work longer, some work smarter, more effectively, and some work with better tools, there are more things produced in NAS. Now, my question to you is this. If the standard of living of NAS is equal to consumption, the consuming of all the products and goods made, and if in a particular year we have everything we had the previous year, plus more farm goods, more clothes, and more articles made, is there any possibility that gross national product and standard of living can go any way but up?
Of course not, Dr. Frankum. Anybody can see that. If the gross national product goes up, there are more things to be consumed. In other words, people just plain have more than they did the other time. That means the gross national product is up and the standard of living is up. That's not very complicated.
But, sir, does that mean all the people in NAS are better off, or just some of them?
Tom, you are talking politics now. Politicians say who gets what. But one thing is certain. The problem of who gets what is more easily resolved when there is more to distribute.
I think what he's saying, Tom, is that the politicians have an easier time saying who gets what when there's more to divide.
Right, Carol, and conversely, you just cannot distribute more than what's there. Does that make sense?
Sure it does, Professor.
In other words, Tom, if the economy has grown, if the gross national product is up, if consumption is up, all we are saying at this point is somehow things have gotten better for the country, and for at least some people, it could be just one person, it could be two people, it could be everybody, it could be half the people. It's entirely possible some people's standard of living may even go down. What we are trying to say is the nation as a whole, the land of NAS, has got to be enjoying a higher standard of living if the total production goes up.
I don't see any way of arguing that.
Now, let's take a look at the reverse. Suppose, for example, the movie producer comes down with some ailment, and instead of making 5 movies a year, he only makes 3. Suppose the repairman, because some of his equipment breaks down, instead of fixing 100 things in a particular year, he only fixes 60. And suppose the baker, who says, I've been working too hard, nobody should keep up a pace like this, I'm just going to work every other day instead of every day. So that means half the bread, half the rolls, and half the cakes are produced this year as opposed to the previous year. What then happens to the standard of living? What happens to the gross national product? What happens to the production of NAS?
Well, they go down.
Is there any way in the world they can go up?
No way.
Is there any way in the world they can stay the same?
No, sir. There's less there.
Okay. We have now arrived at the first unbreakable basic rule of economics. Production up, things get better. Production down, things get worse.
Does this go for any economic unit?
Sure, Carol. Let's look at your business. If one year you worked at 10 accounts and made $20,000, then the next year you work more productively and double the number of accounts. Your income goes up, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
And what you can do with that income determines the standard of living, doesn't it?
You bet it does.
How about the opposite? If one year you have 10 accounts and make $20,000, and the next year you only have half of them and half the amount of money, you've got to be worse off, right? Same for a country?
No problem with that, Professor.
That just doesn't seem all that significant, sir.
Maybe not for now, but I think it will later. As a matter of fact, knowing what you know now, you probably have more practical knowledge of economics than do most of the people in the world.
That's quite a statement, sir.
Well, you tell me later if it is or it isn't. Production up, things get better. Production down, things get worse. We're ready to introduce a needed commodity into NAS, students.
What's that, Professor?
Money. Down through the ages, money has taken many forms. It has varied from cows and beads to wives and shells, and to precious metals, and of late to pieces of paper. In the world today, we have dollars and yen, we have marks and rubles, and shekels and pesos, and so forth. But basically, money is supposed to have three characteristics. First, it needs to be portable. It needs to be of such character that it can be easily carried. Second, it needs to be readily divisible. If you want the 3 things instead of 10 things, money must have the ability to satisfy both quantities and prices. And third, the most important characteristic of money is that it should represent a storage of value. If you have enough money in your pocket on Monday to buy 10 loaves of bread, money should be such that on Friday or next year, the same amount will still be enough to buy those 10 loaves of bread. Portable, divisible, and a storage of value. Now, there are other characteristics, such as the degree of difficulty one would have in counterfeiting and durability, but these are minor considerations. So into NAS, let us now introduce money. And so as not to confuse the doings of NAS with any other country, let's call the money unit in NAS buck. And let's assign somewhat arbitrarily to our 10 citizens the amount of bucks they earn in the course of a year. Carpenter, $20,000. Doctor, $40,000. Automaker, $30,000. Janitor, $10,000. Farmer, $15,000. Artist, $25,000. Tailor, $20,000. Movie producer, $50,000. Repairman, $25,000. Baker, $15,000. And that, students, adds up to a gross national product of $250,000.
Are you sure of that, Professor?
Yes, I am, Jeff. Let's not get involved in mathematics, because mathematics has very little to do with the understanding of economics. Take my word for it. Now let's work a little with these concepts. Introducing money into our model, we can say the gross national product or the standard of living for the country of NAS is $250,000 for a given year, because that's the sum of everyone's work. Now let's say the movie producer made only 4 movies instead of 5, so his production totaled $40,000 instead of $50,000. So somehow the gross national product of NAS is going to drop by $10,000. What does that mean, Carol?
Well, it means the movie producer isn't going to be as well off. It means his standard of living is going down.
That's correct, Carol. Well, what does it mean for NAS?
Oh, I see what you're saying, Professor. The gross national product for NAS is down $10,000.
So what happens to NAS?
Sir, that means the general standard of living for NAS has gone down $10,000 for that year. Or another way to look at it is the average standard of living for each of the 10 citizens of NAS has gone down $1,000 for the year. Is that right?
You bet it is. Now, Tom, how about what we said before? The automaker, instead of making 3 cars a year at an income of $30,000, produces 4 cars a year.
Yes, Professor, I understand. That means the automaker's standard of living will go up. It also means the NAS standard of living is up $10,000, and the average standard of living for each of the 10 citizens of NAS is up by $1,000 a year, correct?
Correct. Now let's put both situations together. The movie producer's standard of living is down by $10,000 a year, meaning the standard of living of NAS is down by $10,000 a year. But at the same time, the automaker's standard of living is up by $10,000 a year, meaning the standard of living of NAS is up by $10,000 a year. The two offset each other. So basically, the standard of living for NAS remains the same, even though the movie producers and the automakers' personal standards of living have changed. By adding the concept of money to NAS, what we are doing is no different than what we did before. We are simply adding monetary values to help us more clearly understand what's happening. And again, students, for whatever reason, if somebody or some people or all people somehow produce more one year than they did the previous year, what must happen to the standard of living in NAS?
It has to go up, sir.
And if for some reason people don't produce what they did the previous year, what must happen to the NAS standard of living?
It must go down, sir.
Equally?
Not necessarily, but it must go down. The more that is produced, the better off NAS has to be. The less that is produced, the worse off NAS has to be.
We have it, sir.
Now we are ready for another concept, Carol. You are the accountant. In our land of NAS with a gross national product of $250,000, what would you say is the average standard of living?
That's easy, sir. 10 people, $250,000. The average standard of living in NAS is $25,000.
Any problem with that, anybody?
None at all, sir.
You see, this is how you compare one family to another family, one nation to another nation, one tribe to another tribe. It's the average standard of living, which is the gross national product divided by the number of people and measured in money.
Sir, is it right to talk about the average standard of living when some people are so poor and other people are so rich?
Tom, I know these things are so important to you, as well they should be. But what you're talking about is politics, not economics. It is the politician who says how the wealth is divided. Economics makes no moral or political judgments. Economics measures, economics forecasts, but economics does not decide how wealth is divided. Others do that. Okay, now we see where the average standard of living of NAS is $25,000 a year. How do you think NAS fares compared to the land of Roz? Let's say their average standard of living is $10,000 a year.
Sir, folks in NAS have got to be way better off than folks in Roz.
Why?
Well, because they possess more things, more products, more services, and they consume more things. Their standard of living is higher. They have more to live with.
Anybody disagree? And how about people in NAS compared to people in COS, where the average standard of living is $50,000 a year?
Sounds like COS is the place to live, sir. They have twice as much as the people in NAS.
Okay, students, now you're getting it. How well off people are depends on the quantity and, of course, the quality of the goods and services they are able to have. These are whatever goods and services are produced.
Professor?
Yes, Tom?
Sounds like production is the key to economic health.
You are halfway home, Tom. The world would be a better place to live if everyone understood just that. The fact that you are from different parts of the country, have different educational backgrounds, you have diverse political views. So far, do any of these differences in any way affect the economic principles we have derived to this point?
No, sir, not a bit. Even Tom and I agree wholeheartedly.
Now, students, stop and think about this. The head of every country, the head of every political party, the head of every tribe, the head of every nation, the head of every union, the head of each faith say to the people, or say to their subjects, or say to their constituencies, do it my way is the best way for you. The kings say it, the communists say it, the capitalists say it, the Democrats say it, the Republicans say it, conservatives say it, liberals say it, the leader of the Klan says it. They say, I know what's best for you, do it my way or you will be better off. Some even say, do it my way or I will eliminate you. But despite what they say, remember, we know whenever, as a result of people's efforts, production increases, the net result is the average standard of living must increase. And if the average standard of living increases, that means the net result for the country is either all people or maybe just certain people will enjoy a better life. And we know the opposite is true, in that any time production goes down, the net result is people will be worse off. Now, students, we are ready to introduce another concept into the land of NAS.
What's that, Professor?
Government. One year, the people of Nas got together and decided they needed somebody to paint lines down the middle of the streets so they wouldn't crash into each other. They also decided it would be good if there was somebody to conduct studies. It would be helpful if somebody found out whether owls hoot louder on hot days than they do on cold days. And remember the land of Roz, where the standard of living is only $10,000 a year? These people have been making noises that they might want to come over to Nas and take things. Well, the good folks of Nas decided they needed an army, so they get together and established a government and selected the repairman to be the head of their government.
What did they call this fellow, Professor?
Well, it doesn't matter. What would you suggest?
President, king, mayor, chairman?
Well, let's not associate him with countries that have leaders with those titles.
Professor, how about the Great Wizard?
Why?
Why not?
Okay, the Great Wizard it is. Now the land of Nas, which formerly had 10 producers, now has 9 producers and 1 non-producer, the government. And the people of Nas realized the wizard, while not doing repair work anymore, certainly has to live, so he should be paid $25,000 a year for serving as the head of the government. So now we have a government to paint lines, make studies, and protect Nas. Isn't Nas better off than it was before? Well, from one vantage point it is, but let's take a look at the economy. Year 1 with no government. Carpenter, $20,000. Doctor, $40,000. Automaker, $30,000. Janitor, $10,000. Farmer, $15,000. Artist, $25,000. Tailor, $20,000. Movie producer, $50,000. Repairman, $25,000. Baker, $15,000. Total, $250,000. Year 2 with a government. Carpenter, $20,000. Doctor, $40,000. Automaker, $30,000. Janitor, $10,000. Farmer, $15,000. Artist, $25,000. Tailor, $20,000. Movie producer, $50,000. Baker, $16,000. Total, $225,000. And over on the side we have the wizard making $25,000. But where do those bucks come from? Students, where is the only place in the world money can come from to pay the wizard?
Out of the 225, Professor, that's the only money there is.
You're right. So the citizens of Nas decide each of them will donate a small portion of their income to pay the wizard's salary. We'll call this money that each of them donates taxes. Now the 225 has to drop to 200 for the 9 workers. That leaves $200,000 for the 9 to live on. Year 2 now has the whiz, the government, and 9 workers with a gross national product of $200,000 for the 9 people. Anybody got a calculator?
I do. It's $22,222.
The 200,000 divided by 9 is $22,222. So the standard of living of Nas is a little less than the $25,000 it used to be. But now people have lines down the middle of the street, so they are less likely to kill each other, and they are going to finally find out if owls hoot more on hot nights or cold nights. And by golly, those people from Roz better stay out of Nas, or the whiz will shoot them. Well, students, how do you feel about year 2? How do you feel about this new government?
I think it's fair and it's logical. You just can't put a price on safety or education. I think it's definitely worth it to the people of Nas for each of them to give up a little of what they have for the good of all.
Carol?
Well, I guess it's not too bad, Professor. I especially think every country needs an army, and the stronger the army, the safer the country. And if the people of Roz know they are going to get shot if they try to plunder Nas, they won't even try it. So I guess what they did was okay.
And Jeff?
Well, Professor, while you were all talking, I figured the 9 citizens of Nas have to live on less than before. So I'd say it's a judgment call. If the people of Nas figure that having benefits they didn't have before is worth living on less money and having less things for themselves, then I guess it's worth it. If they discover their lifestyles are going to diminish too much, then I guess it isn't.
Well, let's go on with it. Let's go to year 3, when something happens with the artist. Let's say either he's getting to an age where the whiz says he should retire, or let's suppose he gets injured, or let's suppose anything. And let's say the people of Nas, together with the whiz, pass a law and say not only should the artist not work anymore, but he should be supported by the government. So the government pays him, let's say, $15,000 a year. Tom?
$15,000 isn't very much compared to the $25,000 he was making before.
Carol?
Yes, but now he's making more than the janitor who probably works 40 hours a week, and as much as a farmer who probably works 80. It's not right to pay someone for doing no work at all.
Now, wait a minute, students. The whiz says what the artist is to get, and that's the way it is in the land of Nas. But let's take a look at what happens to the economy. In year 3, we have carpenter, $20,000, doctor, $40,000, automaker, $30,000, janitor, $10,000, farmer, $15,000, artist, minus $15,000, tailor, $20,000, movie producer, $50,000, repairman, now the whiz, minus $25,000, baker, $15,000 total. 200,000 minus 40,000 equals 160,000 bucks.
Good grief, Professor. That adds up to 160,000 bucks for the gross national product. And with 8 producers and 2 non-producers, the producers are only averaging an even 20,000 bucks a year.
Right, you are, Jeff. All right, let's get on with it. Everybody knows governments have lots and lots of laws, and some of the laws are pretty weird. So the whiz decides one day that instead of the farmer working so hard and so efficiently and making $15,000 a year, now the government is going to pay the farmer $15,000 a year not to produce any crops.
Professor, that sounds kind of familiar.
It ought to. So now we have year 4 with an artist not working, a farmer who is paid not to grow, and a repairman who is the whiz. We have 7 people producing the gross national product and 3 people being paid from what the producers produce. Now let's remember that whenever the government gives money to someone, it must first take money away from someone else. So let's see how the workers of Nas fare when the government helps someone else. In year 4, we have carpenter, $20,000, doctor, $40,000, automaker, $30,000, janitor, $10,000, farmer, minus $15,000, artist, minus $15,000, tailor, $20,000, movie producer, $50,000, repairman, now the whiz, minus $25,000, baker, $15,000, total $185,000 minus $55,000 equals $130,000. Now, the gross national product for the 7 people is over $130,000 a year, and that has each of the 7 averaging a little over $18,000 a year. What do you think, students? Carol?
This is a cancer.
Jeff?
If this keeps going up, it's going to ruin Nas.
Tom?
Well, Professor, the artist couldn't work and he's got to live. And everybody knows that farmers are the most underpaid, underappreciated workers in the country. Can't have a country without a government, but I think you're making your point.
Students, let's continue. Back in the days when the whiz only had to paint the stripes, make the studies, and ward off Roz, he could handle all that. But now come all these additional burdens, such as tending to the unemployed and showing the farmers how to live better. He can't handle this workload. He's got to have an assistant.
What would we call the assistant, Professor?
Well, why not call him what he is? Let's call him a bureaucrat. And now our government is the whiz and a bureaucrat. And let's say the movie producer is the logical one to serve this role. But he's used to big bucks. And he's obviously got to make more than the idle farmer and the unemployed artist. So let's say we pay him $20,000. After all, he's serving his country. We can certainly do with less than the frivolous things in life, but he can't make the bucks the Wiz does. So now we have year 5, where we have 6 of the people producing and 4 living on taxes. We have the farmer enjoying his spare time at $15,000. We have the unemployed artist being paid $15,000. We have a $20,000 bureaucrat, and we have a $25,000 wizard. These are not excessive salaries, and each seems a worthy expenditure. But let's see what happens to the economy. Carpenter, $20,000. Doctor, $40,000. Automaker, $30,000. Janitor, $10,000. Farmer, minus $15,000. Artist, minus $15,000. Tailor, $20,000. Movie producer, minus $20,000. Repairman, minus $25,000. Baker, $15,000. Total, $135,000 minus $75,000 equals $60,000. That amounts to a gross national product of $60,000 a year. For 6 working people, it turns out that the standard of living is now $10,000 each. Now, students, what kind of shape is Nas in? Tom, you first.
Well, Professor, I'll play this game, but I'll tell you right now, I have a lot of questions and doubts. What you're saying is that sooner or later there has to be a line drawn on what the government does, or it's going to break the country.
Jeff?
Doesn't look like the people of Nas are any better off than the people of Roz. And Roz got that way because of drought, revolution, and corruption. Nas got that way by the government doing good deeds for the people.
Carol?
Nas is dead.
And students, what happens to the government gets bigger and bigger?
Well, Professor, it seems as the government gets bigger, certain people seem to be better off. The farmer used to work really hard, and now he gets paid a living wage just to do nothing. And the unemployed artist doesn't have to paint pictures anymore. All he has to do is get his government check each month. Being a movie producer is tough work. Being a bureaucrat doesn't pay that well, but on the other hand, it's security for life. And of course, Wiz doesn't make any more than he did before, but the power satisfies him.
Let's not go to the trouble to make non-producers out of any of the remaining producers. But can you see what would happen if we did it with maybe 2 more producers? Pretty soon, the non-producers outnumber the producers, and the number of non-producers votes, assuming Nas is a place where there is voting, are going to outnumber the votes of the producers. Then wouldn't you say it's reasonable to expect the non-producers, the recipients of the tax money, are certainly not going to vote themselves less money? That just isn't the way people tick.
Professor?
Yes, Tom?
I have a lot of trouble with one concept. What you are saying for our model Nas is absolutely clear. But in real life, if, for instance, the artist is out of work, isn't it reasonable that somebody else should come along and be an artist and replace the lost production? And isn't somebody going to replace that farmer who is paid not to produce? And won't somebody come along and make movies? The position vacated by our new bureaucrat? And won't there be somebody trained in repairing things who can't take up the slack left by the Wiz?
Tom, you are essentially right, and we are probably able to handle that concept at this point. Let's stop a minute and take a look at Nas's working force. In year 1, we had 10 people producing $250,000 a year and a healthy standard of living of $25,000 each. Then in year 5, we had 6 people working and 4 people not working. Let's suppose the 4 people that aren't working are replaced by new additions to Nas. So let's put that gross national product for year 5 back to $250,000 a year. But remember, we now have 4 other non-producers, drawing a total of $75,000 a year and out of the economy. Now, where must those bucks come from, Tom?
Well, they must come from the producers, Professor, out of the $250,000, since there's nowhere else they can come from.
Correct. So now let's take $75,000 away from the 10 producers in order to subsidize the 4 non-producers. And that means 175,250 minus 75 equals $175 per year for the 10 producers, or an average of $17,500 for the 10 workers as an average standard of living for Nas, down from $25,000 in order to support the government and its programs. Same results. Tom, just a little slower process.
Professor, are you saying a government and its programs are bad?
Calling it bad is a moral judgment, Tom. Economics doesn't make these judgments. Politicians make them. And all I'm trying to show is that as government grows, for whatever reason, it weakens the economy. It lowers the standard of living of the people. Tom, remember the old saying about putting straws on a camel's back?
I hear you loud and clear, Professor, but needy people are still needy, and a nation can't exist without a government.
Carol?
And it certainly needs an army, and I mean a strong army.
Jeff?
But where do you draw the line, sir?
That, my friend, is the big one. And that is not decided by economists. It is decided by politicians. Now, students, let's go back and review just briefly what we agreed to. And that is production up, things get better. Production down, things get worse. It looks like we are ready for our second vital economic principle. The larger the government gets, the more it weakens the economy. Tom?
Professor, I think I would probably disagree with Carol on where that line should be drawn, but there is no question, as you have explained it to us, the line has to be drawn.
Do the rest of you agree with Tom?
Yes.
Yes.
Students, I would say you now know more about economics than 99% of the people in the world, and at least more than 90% of the politicians, and probably more than a great number of economists, only because you understand that production is the key to economic health, and that government, unless restrained, will sap a nation. Tom, supposing you had a brother who would die unless you had a kidney transplant, would you give him one of yours?
Without hesitation, I would, Professor.
Supposing now you had two brothers. Both of them were going to die unless they had a kidney transplant. Would you give them each one of your kidneys?
Professor, that's an unfair question.
Try to answer it.
I would definitely give one, and I just don't know about the other.
Would each be worthy causes?
Yes.
Would each one be of equal need?
Yes.
Is it fair to say if you resolve both their needs, it would kill you?
Yes, sir.
What right did you have to live and let your brothers die?
Gosh.
Now supposing you had three brothers.
Professor, I wouldn't have 3 kidneys to give.
If you had 3 brothers, all with the same problem, and you decided to give up one of your kidneys, which one would you give it to?
That's impossible, sir. Please don't ask me to do that.
Wouldn't each of you have a real need?
Yes, but...
Well, let's take a look at a little different way. Let's say you are a passerby and there's an accident. The medics come and discover that unless one of the victims has a pint of blood now, that victim will die. Would you volunteer your blood?
Yes, sir, I would.
Suppose there are 2 victims, and they are both about to die unless they each have a pint. Would you give 2 pints?
I would.
How about 3, 4, 5, and how about 20?
I don't have that many pints.
How many would you give?
Well, I'd probably need to know how many I could give and still survive.
Is it right that you survive? Or should the medics take all your blood in order to, let's say, let you die in order to save perhaps 10?
Professor, you've done it again. That's an unfair question.
Is it, Tom? Let's go back to the land of Nas. Where do we draw that line, Tom? At what point does the government cease doing things for people? At what point does the government stop helping people? What is the difference between what people need and what they want? Should the taxpayer see to it that every unemployed person gets a new car each year?
That's ridiculous.
Well, what's not ridiculous? What is right? When government spends, the economy drinks its own blood, which in turn enhances its thirst. Because it keeps drinking, it must die. So what's right?
Professor, you're driving me crazy.
I'm talking about the world, Tom. I'm talking about this country. But let's touch on one additional point before moving on. Let's deal a little, Tom, with what you felt was fair. Let's go back to year 1 when everybody producing and everybody consuming, which represents the highest standard of living we've discussed. As soon as we take someone out of the working force and have the workers taxed in order to support that non-producer, instead of taxing everybody a little, let's just tax the rich, okay?
Thank you, Professor.
When we made the repairman the wizard, and as in our amended model, somebody came in and also became a repairman. The government needed $25,000 in tax money. Let's take it, for instance, the doctor. Everybody knows doctors make a lot of money. So now the doctor, instead of making $40,000 a year, makes $15,000 a year. Now, how many people are going to put in the 10 or 15 years in school, start at the bottom of the heap, and work those long hours for $15,000, knowing the government is going to take the rest of their income anyway away from them? Or better yet, let's get away from Nas and be realistic. In real life, if the government took all the money that all the rich people in our country earned and simply gave it to poor people, contrary to popular opinion, it would hardly make a dent in what we call poverty.
Is that true, Professor?
That's how the numbers come out. And how much can the government take away from the doctors so that pretty soon there won't be any doctors?
I get your point.
Where are we now?
Professor.
Yes, Jeff.
I understand what you taught us about production. I understand what you taught us about how the government growth affects us. But where is the country today? Where do we stand?
Let me make a few observations and then tell me how you feel. When Social Security started, several hundred workers were taxed a very small percent to support one person on Social Security. These days, that number is 3 workers to support one person, but the percentage out of each person's paycheck is way up. In other words, the percentage that each worker is taxed keeps going up. Many expect in a fairly short time the number will go from the hundreds it was to the 3 it is, to only 1. So out of your paycheck, you can be expected to support entirely someone on Social Security.
My gosh.
The national debt is so staggering that just the interest payments are now the 3rd largest part of the budget. They are the fastest growing part of the budget, entirely out of control. A generation ago, the entire country, everything, was run on far less money than just what the interest on the national debt is now.
Good grief!
Before the Depression, the average person worked only a few days a year, representing the tax money taken from him. Today, the average person works 2 days out of every 5 to pay taxes. That's Monday and Tuesday for the government, and Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for himself. At the rate we have been going, that number will shortly be 3 days out of 5. Before the Depression, the government would borrow a few pennies out of each dollar saved by the public. Today, it borrows the majority of each dollar saved. Just a few years ago, any country showing some of the economic numbers that our country does today would have been called a banana republic. No offense to our neighbors to the south, but the term was used as disrespect to any country allowing such numbers. This would certainly make us the largest banana republic in the world, and it's getting worse fast.
Professor.
Yes, Jeff.
I'm scared.
As well as you should be.
Professor, what can we do about this?
Tom, the answer lies in the history books.
Professor, I teach history. What do you mean?
History shows us, time after time, that when a country's economy weakens, especially through the inflation, the economy eventually collapses.
What happens then, Professor?
It has always meant the loss of freedom, the loss of rights. It usually means dictatorial powers come into play supported by some kind of police or army. People have no choice. They have no rights. They are told what to do, told what not to do. Penalties are supreme. I'm a teacher too, Tom, and I know those who do not learn from history are condemned to repeat the mistakes of history.
Professor?
Yes, Tom?
I'm scared too.
As well as you should be.